There are those in the United States that lust for war, especially with Iran. I'm going to prove to you today that that is immoral, it is unethical, and it is outright un-American. Now, that is a pretty bold statement, but one that I think I have some pretty strong evidence for. I want to take a look at a few things today that can lay this out in ways that I think that even those who may be blindly behind some of these ideas here and say, we want war with Iran, I'm going to show you why that is not only unnecessary, it harms our country to go down that path. Listen, there's a reason why we have an army and an armed forces to keep our country safe. Every country has to have an armed forces to prevent anybody from coming to attack it. Obviously, the stronger that you can make it, the more that you can deter others from ever wanting to do anything to you. I myself served in the United States Army for over just under 21 years of total active service, spread out over about a 30-year span, from 1985, when I was a private in a multiple launch rocket systems battery, all the way through my retirement in 2015 as an armor colonel, a lieutenant colonel. And so during that time, I fought everything from high-intensity tank-on-tank conflicts in Desert Storm through counterinsurgency wars in the Middle East, through military training in Iraq. I trained in Iraqi border battalion on the border with Iran, and worked in the Pentagon. I worked in all kinds of places inside there throughout my tour. So I put my money where my mouth is. And when I say I love this country and I love what it stands for and I love the people in it, I'm willing to risk my life, to sacrifice my life if it was necessary, to defend this country, to defend the people in it. I never shied away from it in those combat situations. I will never shy away from it. If the circumstances in the future ever came to it, I would be willing to do so again, even at my advanced age. I'll do whatever I can. So I don't apologize for employing lethal military power. When it's necessary to defend our interests, that's why you have it. And you have to have it because there genuinely are evil forces out there. And in certain times, they may want to impose their will upon us, or they may want to deprive us of our own life or liberty. And in those cases, that's why you have an armed forces. But why you don't have an armed forces, or why you shouldn't have an armed force, is to coerce and compel others around the world who are weaker to bend according to your desires just because you want to. And that is where I part company with a lot of people who are very famous in our country that I think have a very vastly different definition of what it means to be pro-American. Now, Trump ran on this platform of America first. I agree with that. I have always agreed with that. Long before there was a Donald Trump in the political sphere, I always believed that it seemed self-evident, that it was intuitive that, of course, you want to be pro-American. You're an American. And especially if you're serving in the armed forces, naturally, you want your government. It should be, again, it shouldn't even be a question. It should be an automatic assumption. Every government on the planet should be primarily focused on advocating for the interest and the needs and the desires and the safety and the security and the prosperity of its people. That's what government is. That it takes any group of people and says, we're going to provide security, we're going to provide form and function so that society can function, and a defense against anyone who wishes to do a steal. That's just almost just the definition of what government, generally speaking, across the globe is supposed to be about. Now, obviously, there are substantially different interpretations of what those fundamentals, values, etc. are, and that's why you have different countries. But we are supposed to be. You remember what's his name? President Reagan, of course, most famously said he viewed the United States as a city on a hill, something that would be something that people would aspire to. We have the Statue of Liberty. All of those kinds of things are fantastic and great vehicles to say this is what Americanism is. Many of us see ourselves as this beacon of hope, of defending the defenseless, standing up for freedom and democracy, and standing against, like things like fascism during World War II, etc. That's what we like to think of ourselves. But there are some who have exchanged some of those values and use the tag actually to paste on top of what they really feel, which is power. There are those who just want to use the tags of all those things I just mentioned, all those values and ethics and morals and aspirations that are so good and helpful. They want to use those to paper over a deeper and potentially even sinister view that they want to harm others, and they want to compel others through sheer force of arms and the power of our economics and everything else to compel subservience to what they want. That's not the America that I believe in, and I stand against those kinds of people. I do it without hesitation. I do it without embarrassment or apology. I firmly stand on the side of the vast majority of genuine Americans from all different stripes who just want to live a good life. They want to be free to say whatever they want to say. They want to feel safe while they're doing it, and they want to have a chance to prosper, and they want to feel that they're protected from any external aggression. Within that range right there, there's tons of room for people to have all different kinds of values, of preferences, religions, life philosophies. All of that can exist within that ecosphere, if you will, of what can be there. That's the America that I have fought for. I've never thought that people have to believe the way that I do. They have to serve God the way that I do. They have to even believe the same God that I believe in. No need for that, or no God at all. Doesn't make any difference. That's the civil country that we live in that I fought for. That's who we are, in my view. That's my interpretation and definition of what I would like for us to be. It's not shared by everyone, though. And there's another point that I want to make here. There's a reason why we have alliances, and there's a reason why we have friends around the world. We don't need to live in an isolation. This whole idea of isolationism has always been kind of bastardized and used again as a baseball bat against anybody who doesn't want to go to war with anybody. It has been for probably centuries, really. But I am most assuredly not in that camp. The one that I'm in is I want aggressive and very active international engagement. And so I think it's useful to have friends in other countries around the world. On some occasions, even to have an outright alliance, because sometimes strength in numbers helps everybody and increases our security and our opportunity for advancement and prosperity. Those are all good things. But I also hearken back to George Washington in his farewell address, where he warned about the permanent alliances and permanent friendships or so, because the sands of time shift, and sometimes interest of their various countries, ours and others, also shift. So you don't want a permanent connection on that, because if the interest of various countries or ours changes over time, we have to make sure that we look out for our interests first, and everywhere possible, let's cooperate with others. We also don't want any permanent enemies either, and that's another thing that Washington warned about. More on that in a future episode. But we're going to focus on those two things right now. We have a national defense for our protection, and we have friendships and sometimes alliances with other countries where it benefits our country, and then we'll politely say no thank you when that's the way, when our interests diverge. That should be self-evident, and it shouldn't even be up for question. That should be obvious what it is. But there are those who don't see it that way on either count. There are those who say no, and we'll pick Iran first, that they have an absolute lust for war with Iran. And the most likely reason they have this lust is because they are subordinating American interests, American national security, for that of another nation. I'm going to show you this clip here of two American senators, both are in the Republican Party, who are going to lay out their case for why they think there should be war with Iran, and listen carefully to see if you can see where their real allegiance lies.
Look at what Iran already does without nuclear weapons. They threaten American troops in the region. They support terrorism by arming Hezbollah, Hamas, and the Houthis. Further, consider what Iran has also tried to do here: assassinate Donald Trump and other U.S. government current and former officials. All of this, again, done without Iran having the cover of a nuclear weapon. Iran can either have a nuclear weapon or a nuclear program that is lying in ruins, smoking, destroyed, and dismantled. Or it can have a peaceful civilian nuclear power program with no centrifuges, no enriching, no reprocessing, and no pathway to a nuclear weapon.
Okay, so sorry, I actually got my clips out of order there. That was Tom Cotton laying out what he wants for war and laying out a case which he wants you to believe without examination that makes you think, holy cow, yeah, we got to go to war with those guys. Absolutely. I mean, trying to assassinate our president, that's crazy. First of all, let's take a look at some of the things he said, because this is where we start to see there's a real problem here. Number one, it is alleged that Iran tried to assassinate President Trump. Don't know if it's true or not. I'm not saying it isn't true. I'm saying it's an allegation that is very fuzzy on the proof and on the evidence here. Maybe they did. They certainly have some reason to, because what Senator Cotton failed to notice is that we have assassinated senior Iranian officials. He actually mentioned, he said Trump and other officials that they've tried to assassinate. Well, what do you think's going to happen, Tom, when we assassinate their 4-star general, their equivalent of the chief of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, which we have done? We assassinated him in January 2020, Soleimani. We have assassinated other Iranian people. We've launched assassinations in Baghdad with a missile. We've killed people that we don't like in there. Israel has done the same. Israel has destroyed the embassy compound, which violates every law that you can imagine in the world that we claim to uphold. Destroyed an embassy compound in Syria because they claimed that there was someone that they didn't like that was in there, so they killed them. They've assassinated people in the capitals of Baghdad, in the capital of Iran, etc. They've assassinated scores of Iranian people, diplomats, scientists, military people, all over the place, routinely. And you want to hold as a reason why we have to potentially go to war with Iran, because you claim that they have attempted to assassinate one of our leaders, which is bad. And I wouldn't in any way ever defend that. And if it ever truly turned out to be the case and somebody did assassinate one of our leaders, then I would be the first one to say, yes, there has to be consequences for that. And they've got to be severe. No question about that. But when you want to talk about these nefarious actions, and there was a bunch of other things he mentioned on there, and he fails to note that we have these profound sanctions on them. We have deprived them of everything. And he also specifically talked about how the Obama situation that with the JCPOA laid the foundation for all of this, oblivious to the fact that during the Obama deal in 2015, which had some flaws, and I'm not going to defend that as perfect either, but it was pretty dang good and much, much better than what we have today that we purposely, willingly left behind, so that now then the constraints that were on them, we took off because we left them, claiming because it wasn't perfect, we're going to get out of it. Well, now then, because you don't want the perfect, or you didn't like what wasn't perfect, now you have something much worse. And now here we are trying to negotiate something else that's also not going to be perfect, because, spoiler alert, when you have a negotiation between two sides, each side wants something. And if you want to get to an agreement, each side has to get something. So guess what? You're not going to get the perfect deal that you want, because what you want to avoid war is complete and total submission. You want the other side to acknowledge and accede to everything that you suggest, which is tantamount to absolute surrender and demilitarization. You're asking them to get rid of even the long-range missiles, things that they use to defend themselves. You want them to get rid of all of that, or you say we have to use other means. That's not going to work. So if that's your standard there, then you are absolutely paving the way for war. Now, back to my original statement about why we have armed forces. We have armed forces to defend ourselves. We don't have armed forces to go and say, I don't like what these guys in Iran are doing, so I'm going to use our armed forces to go kill them. That's what when you take away all the tags and the empty slogans that these guys have, that's what you're left with. Now, by itself, that's a problem, because you are wanting to use American military power, which totally, by the way, not a minor issue, violates the United States Constitution and the 1973 War Powers Act, period. Point blank, full stop, black and white. No matter what anybody wants to say, Those two documents say that only Congress can authorize a war against another country. And the 1773 War Powers Act specifically says that the president himself can only use a military power if there's been a declaration, if there's been specific congressional authorization, or if that country attacked us first, a la Pearl Harbor. That hasn't happened. So since none of those conditions exist, it would be illegal for the president to order those forces into a war, period. It's as simple as it can be. Tom Cotton's not concerned about that because we have violated that law so many times and violated the Constitution so wantonly over so many years. Now then, they don't even give it a second thought. They don't even worry about covering it up. They just say, no, if we want to, we will. And he's the president, the commander-in-chief, so he can. Okay, that's bad. That by itself, we could almost stop the video right there and say, stop doing things that are illegal and violate our own law and put our own troops at risk because of your war lust. We could stop right there. Unfortunately, we're not going to stop right there because there's another even bigger problem here, and that is on whose behalf we're trying to do this. And you don't have to take my word for it. Take Senator Tom Cotton and Senator Lindsey Graham.
Senator Cotton and I believe that the only way to prevent Iran from getting a nuclear weapon is for them to completely dismantle their enrichment program. Without enriching uranium, you cannot make a nuclear weapon. That is non-negotiable for us. Complete dismantlement. President Trump said that this weekend, and in our resolution, we describe in granular detail what dismantlement would look like. So if you want to know what the Senate Republicans think about dismantlement, you can read this resolution. And this resolution mirrors what Israel would be believes to be an acceptable outcome on dismantlement.
A horrible one-sided deal that should never, ever have been made. It didn't bring calm, it didn't bring peace, and it never will. Those words are as true today as they were 7 years ago today when President Trump said them, driving a stake through the heart of Barack Obama's disastrous nuclear deal with Iran. That deal was one-sided, in bad faith, and did nothing to stop Iran's march to a nuclear weapon. In fact, as Prime Minister Netanyahu said, it didn't block Iran's path to a nuclear weapon, it paved the path.
Okay, so you have Lindsey Graham saying that his desire to use military force against Iran mirrors what Israel thinks. Why do I want to do something that mirrors what another country thinks? Whatever happened to, you're a senator of America. You're not in the Knesset. So why are you talking about American actions that mirror something of another country? We're not threatened by Iran. We are not threatened by Iran. There's nothing that Iran has done. They've been in power since 1979. They have never attacked us at present. There's lots of claims. Let me just point this out. There are lots of claims that during the Iraq War, in the early 2000s, that they helped some of the other side there, and Americans were killed as a result. Now, that was obviously a horrible thing. I fought in that war at one point, so obviously not something I'm cool with. But before you get too eager to say, aha, that justifies us, bear in mind what we've been doing since 2022, actually many years before that, by supporting Ukraine to kill Russians. Now, unless you're going to validate what Russia's been saying, that we should be attacked because of we're supporting Ukraine to kill Russians, then you might want to put the brakes on saying that the allegation that Iran helped kill Americans through lethal support during the Iraq War with some of the insurgents, you might want to cool the jets a little on that. Don't know what happened, don't like it, and I think we should do everything we can to stop that. But you got to be careful that you don't recognize that you're doing one thing on one side and doing something different on the other side, and you want them to both be true and just at the same time. It don't work that way. You can say it, it doesn't make it so. But then you have Tom Cotton there says, yes, this is just like what Netanyahu says. Why are we siding Israel every time we talk about what we're supposed to do? Look, if Israel and Iran have this conflict that's going on between the two, that's something that should be between those two. Again, Since 1979, Iran and Israel have been in this proxy war. Yes, I know that Israel or Iran all the time says death to Israel, death to America, and all that. I got it. What do you think they're going to say when there's all these assassinations left and right? If you don't want them to do some of those things, then you might try, I don't know, not killing them all the time, not threatening them all the time. And taking them, like destroying their embassies, assassinating their people in other countries, assassinating people in their country. So if you do those things, and that's between them, okay? That's between Iran and Israel. If they want to take that action and they want to take the risks for their potential consequences, that's a sovereign decision of theirs. I have no say in that. I have some opinions. I won't share them. It doesn't make any difference. I'm not an Israeli. I'm an American. So what Israel does with its national security, with its armed forces, within its constitution, within its laws, that's up to them, as it is with Iran itself. We don't have a threat from Iran. They don't threaten us. They are a relatively middling power in the Middle East, and they are more than balanced by other adversarial regimes. They have been for a long time. By the way, it used to be Iraq was one of them. But we helped Iran out there by doing regime change. We getting rid of Saddam Hussein. And instead of having those guys bouncing each other out, now then Iraq is an Iran-friendly country. They even have some of their people inside their security architectures who are Iranian, pro-Iranian. So well done on that, guys. Good job helping us out by actually making it easier on Iran. I won't go down that path too much further, but you get the point there. Well, now it's starting to look out that maybe some things are changing here now with President Trump, because we have Steve Witkoff, who has been doing, listen, I know he takes a lot of hit for being, he's a real estate guy or whatever, but look, in terms of diplomacy, he's been doing a great job since he came into office across the board here. And I give props to him. Nobody's perfect, but man, compared to what we've had for a long time, I think he's been doing a really good job. And he said in an interview with Breitbart a couple of days ago, that he's a little worried about neocon warmongers.
The neocon element believes that war is the only way to solve things. And the president believes that his force of personality, the way he is going to respond to situations, can bend people to do things in a much better way in the interest of the United States government. And I believe in that too.
Now, there's... we can quibble over whether President Trump can bend people outside of our country to his will. That's a whole lot more difficult than it sounds, because you're not going to bend anybody anywhere unless they get something out of it. Like I said a minute ago with negotiations, you want to get something, then you have to be prepared to give something too. And unfortunately, in our political ecosystem, all you can do is take from Iran. You can't give anything. So we'll see how effective that's going to be. I've shown you from February where the Ayatollah said that they're not going to negotiate anything around their security to the United States. And if we threaten them, they're going to threaten us back and all that. But since that time, Witkoff has had some success at negotiating and talking to the Iranians. They said they're willing to talk. Terrific. Let's go down that path. In that same interview, Witkoff also expanded a little bit on this whole neocon stuff. But at the end of this, it's a little bit more problematic. Watch this.
We've seen is, again, these attacks have continued from these critics. They don't want to see peace reached in a lot of these places. They don't want to see a deal with the Iranians. They like conflict. They don't want to see a deal reached with Gaza. They don't want to see a war end in Ukraine. What say you?
I say it's confirmation bias. They believe they have a bias towards military interaction, and so in their minds, anything that is of a military solution, of a military nature to be a solution to that problem. And you hear this all the time. You hear people say, no, we have to go treat that person with force. The Iranians are going to manipulate you in a dialogue, and so you're not going to be effective there. They may attempt to manipulate me. I don't think that they're going to be able to manipulate me. In that particular example, if the Iranians make the mistake of thinking that they can procrastinate at the table, then they won't see much of me. And the alternative, as the president says, will be a bad alternative for them.
So it's unclear, and maybe intentionally so, what a bad alternative means if they don't get to a negotiated settlement. Because look, you have to understand what we're asking Iran to do. First of all, let's just take a look at that specific situation here. We're asking them to have no enrichment capacity at all, not even for civilian purposes. We're asking them to limit their long-range missile systems. We're asking them to get rid of all of their reprocessing stuff. They have to take it somewhere else. They're not going to be able to keep any of it here, which will certainly preclude even the possibility that they could later go to a nuclear weapons program. So that would achieve that objective from our perspective, but then it would also completely leave Iran vulnerable. It seems very unlikely to me that we have any carrots to give. Even if Trump wasn't worried about what anybody else would think and he gave a bunch of other carrots, I can't think of enough carrots that we could offer Iran to make them follow in the footsteps of Libya when Muammar Gaddafi gave away all his stuff. And then years later, and we gave him some stuff, by the way, there was a lot of economic benefits that Bush gave at the time that seemed to make it look like, well, it turned out a win-win situation. Well, we know how that turned out, because when the next president came in, Barack Obama, he supported a military operation that helped bring down Gaddafi, and then he was murdered in the streets. And yeah, that's not the motive you want to use. And ironically, and maybe not ironically, Netanyahu has been using that, said, yes, let's follow the Libya model. Now, I think my personal opinion is that Netanyahu is saying that, knowing how abhorrent that would be to any other nation on the planet, because he wants them to say no. He wants them to not agree to it because he wants to go in. And we know that. I've shown you many sound clips over the months where Netanyahu absolutely wants to take out Iran. He wants to solve the problem once and for all. Naftali Bennett, so once in a 50-year opportunity, all that kind of stuff. So we know where the Israeli side is. They're not very shy about talking about where it is. But the question is, where is the United States? Now, Witkoff's talking about right now that Trump is willing to negotiate, and it seems like he's kind of backing down from his rhetoric. And here's the problem. He is backing down from his rhetoric. It's not an impression. Here is Trump in March the 7th, so 2 months ago, was pretty bellicose himself.
You know, we're down to final strokes with Iran. That's going to be an interesting time. And we'll see what happens. But we're down to the final moments. We're at final moments. You can't let them have a nuclear weapon. It's an interesting time in the history of the world. But we have a situation with Iran that something's going to happen very soon. Very, very soon. You'll be talking about that pretty soon, I guess. And hopefully we can have a peace deal. You know, I'm not speaking out of strength or weakness. I'm just saying I'd rather see a peace deal than the other. But the other will solve the problem.
Yeah, but will it solve the problem? You may recall around that same time is when he made that real famous statement that if Iran doesn't agree to what we want, there will be bombing, was the word that he used there. So that's what he was saying 2 months ago. But now all of a sudden, he's kind of backing down. You may recall when Netanyahu was in the Oval Office last month, the two were sitting there, and Trump had true socialed out that, we see eye to eye on all these issues, et cetera. And then all of a sudden, he seemed to shift while Netanyahu was sitting in the seat there on the cameras, where he said, yeah, we're going to start negotiating with Iran, and we're going to send Witkoff and some other diplomats, and we're going to talk at very high levels, et cetera. And by accounts afterwards, it was shocking Netanyahu, because he's like, wait, what do you mean? I thought we were one and the same on this, which is basically we're going to go and try to destroy Iran. There was some news that has come out that says Tulsi Gabbard and several others helped talk Trump off the ledge and made him realize that if you go through with this military plan, which was supposed to have happened apparently in early May, then there would be all these really bad consequences for the United States. And apparently that worked. And he recognized, okay, well, I don't want to go down a path that's going to make things worse for the United States or even him personally. So now he's kind of backed off. And here in recent days, we've seen he's getting ready for a Middle East trip next week. And by the way, he's not planning on going to Israel. That by itself is like, wait, what? You're not going to go see that. That used to be the first stop you would make, that an American president would make on any trip. And in this from the Middle East Eye, Gary, if you can throw that first full screen up there, you can see that that's making a lot of people in Israel really nervous, because Trump may have several decisions in the lead up to his Gulf visit that have ignored Israeli interest. And he doesn't want Trump to spoil his Gulf visit. So Trump has some interests that are in America's interests, that diverge from Israel's interest, and it's making Israel really nervous. Now, obviously, I applaud that. If there's interests that are going to help us, if making peace among various countries or various issues and solving those is in American interest, that's what the American president is supposed to do. So that's a good sign. In fact, that's a very good sign. Then there's another one here. This is an ex post from Dropside, I think it was, where they were reporting from Israeli press that according to Arab and U.S. diplomatic sources cited by Israel Hayom, the Trump administration is preparing to announce a full plan to end the war in Gaza. The deal would include long-term reconstruction, government arrangements, with the U.S. playing a central role. Okay, that's like dynamite, because you may recall just a handful of days ago, you had Netanyahu say, we're going to now go back into the Gaza Strip in a full-fledged offensive. We're going to occupy the place and all this. And you have Trump now, days later, saying that we're going to announce a plan to end the war in Gaza, which is absolutely cross purposes with anything Netanyahu wants to do. And of course, I applaud that more than anything, because we got to understand, listen, folks, that war cannot be won militarily. You have already created so many more enemies for Israel than existed even on 10/7, and there was a lot then. And of course, this goes all the way back to 1947. History didn't start on 10/7. That did not come out of nowhere, even though you're told that on a lot of Western press all the time, and certainly from the likes of Tom Cotton, Laura Loomer, Mark Levin, etc. All these guys, all they talk about is that Israel is this complete innocent entity that never does anything wrong. They're innocent of everything. And all these darn Arabs keep doing all these bad things. And of course, we have to go back, because we know what happened in the Holocaust. We don't want that. Never again. We can't do that. So in the remembrance of that, we have to go after all these people. It is beyond time. It should never even got to this point. But hear me carefully. It is beyond time to be honest with ourselves. We cannot just turn a blind eye to everything Israel does and expect it to end good for Israel and expect it to end good for us. It's not going to. Israel has been carrying on this horrific, destructive war that is plainly evident, despite all of the fake tags and words that they put on front of this ugly mess, that is designed to kill lots of Palestinian people, not just Hamas, but Palestinian people, and to systematically destroy the ability of the Gaza Strip to hold life for anybody. All the best they can hope for right now, the Palestinian people, is to exist. And even that's still at risk, because a lot of the food aid is still being blocked. People are starving to death right as it is right now, and malnutrition is rampant because they're trying to spread out so everybody gets a little bit, but Israel is not letting the food trucks in. Those are the realities here. Listen, that whole thing about blockading the food, the Israelis don't deny it. The Israel side doesn't. They say that, no, this is to pressure Hamas to give us the remaining hostages. You had a deal in place that would have had all of the hostages back by now if you'd only been good to your word and put into effect the deal that was already made. That's a fact. The timelines and the three phases would already have happened by now, largely. It could have happened by now. All of your hostages would have been back. There was a plan in place, and Israel stopped it because they said, no, we want to change the terms. We want to do things different. We want to require more of them, of the Hamas people. So when they didn't get it, they just went back in, and now then started the thing over, and then they blockaded them. It is illegal by the rules-based order that we claim to uphold. Absolutely. The Geneva Convention, the laws of war, expressly specifically say that you cannot use corporate punishment against a population for a military purpose. It is illegal. That's what the Nazi Germany guys did. They would often do that in the areas where they had where they were occupying people. They would have corporate punishment. If there was a terrorist attack against some of the Nazi soldiers, then they would have reprisals against the civilian population, group punishment. So that was written in afterwards in the law. It says, no, you can't do that anymore. It's absolutely, all the nations signed it. But yet, here it is. We're not only turning a blind eye to it, we're giving them the bombs to continue doing it. That is un-American. That violates any kind of morals that we say we stand for. It's not true. It's bad. We should stop doing it right away. And maybe maybe we're starting to see a little bit of daylight where these kinds of things are starting to come up. Here's Thomas Friedman in the New York Times yesterday. And this is a big deal to me. The headline in the New York Times, Thomas Friedman, this Israeli government is not our ally. And in the piece there, and I've had plenty to disagree with Thomas Friedman over the years, but man, is he spot on here, and I applaud this. He writes, "Dear President Trump, there are very few initiatives that you've undertaken since coming to office that I agree with, except in the Middle East. The fact that you are traveling there next week and meeting with leaders of Saudi Arabia, the United Arab Emirates, and Qatar, that you have no plans to see Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu in Israel, suggests to me that you are starting to understand a vital truth. That this Israeli government is behaving in ways that threaten hardcore U.S. interests in the region. Netanyahu is not our friend." And it goes on from there. And he says many of the things in there. And I from what I read, there's almost nothing in that I disagree with. But listen, it's time to start doing this. Gary, if you have, we didn't talk about this before, but if you have any of the B-roll that we've had where you can see all these starving children and this begging for food under this food blockade, if you could toss that up there right now, because that's one of the things that animates me so much, that our bombs are the ones that are supporting a lot of this. And that the Biden administration before gave virtual nonstop support to everything that Netanyahu wanted to do. In fact, there was a lot of Netanyahu and a lot of his supporters were aggravated because Biden had any kind of constraints at all. But they didn't want any, and there were very few of them there. And you may remember this big uproar when Biden, for a period of time, put a hold on one category of weapon, 2,000-pound bombs, but not anything else. Not all the other missiles, not all the bombs, not all the ammunition, none of that stuff. He never paused on that. So the things that are causing this, he didn't do anything when Netanyahu stopped food aid, because this is not the first time that this has happened. Didn't do anything with that. So we have culpability there. It's hard to admit because we don't want to. And I'll tell you the reason why. And part of it I understand. Part of it I understand quite a lot. And I mentioned it a second ago, the Holocaust. Because in World War II, there was an absolute, no kidding, unequivocal pogrom against the Jews, against some other categories as well, but 6 million Jews were just slaughtered in that. And that is something that has always just really pierced my soul from the time I was young. I was stationed in Europe as part of my military career several times. I lived there a total of 6 years. I went to the Dachau concentration camp in Munich, just outside of Munich, 3 times during the times I lived there. And I recently, this last year, took my family with me. I wanted them to see it too. These are some of the pictures in Dachau right there. That's inside the museum, and that depicts the horrific conditions that they lived in. It's just a heartbreak thing. But I keep going back. There's the infamous ovens that you've seen where the cremations took place. It is beyond horrific. And I've been to the Holocaust Museum in Washington, D.C. here. In 2016, I had an opportunity to go to Auschwitz. And that's maybe the most infamous of all the camps there. This is the railroad that all the prisoners they saw when they entered into the camp. And then here's some of the versions of their cremation facilities. Just horrific. I went into one of the gas chambers. This is actually at the beginning where it says Arbeit macht frei, which of course work makes free, which was always untrue. It's the same thing that was on the gate there you saw in Dachau. That's something that they put up on all these places. All it did was just put a Band-Aid over it psychologically to make you think you had some kind of hope. It was just more of the mental torment. And because I have been so taken by that, and this whole thing that never again, I am a strong, passionate believer in that. Never again should we do that. But that means never again for anyone. And it is beyond ironic and perverse that now then the group that genuinely was afflicted in the past, and there's nothing to take away from anything that the Jews of that age suffered, but the world should all stand united to make sure it never happens again to anyone. And when you see those images that Gary showed, We're not talking about 6 million Palestinians that have died, as it was with the Jews. So the scale is not the same. But categorically, there are some uncomfortable similarities, grotesque similarities. These people are inside of a prison, basically. The whole Gaza Strip is blocked off. Nobody can get in or out. It's very difficult to get in. Nobody can get out. And this is how they're living there. That's why I say they're existing right now. That's it. We should never support this. And if Trump is doing what that which one was it? The drop site twist there. If that's true, I certainly hope that is. Whatever this Israeli source that said that, I pray genuinely, literally, not being facetious at all, that is true. That I hope that Trump is saying, all right, enough is enough. We're going to end that. If he does, he has my full support towards anything like that to end that. Because understand this, Israel cannot continue that operation. They cannot go into the Gaza Strip without the full and continued support of the United States in all categories of ammunition, weapons support, etc. They just don't have it. They don't have the capacity to generate that kind of ammunition, so they just can't do it. And President Trump can bring that to an end by saying, Netanyahu, that's it. We're done with this. This is a militarily unattainable objective. You will never bring peace and security to your country by military means, by just literally flattening into dust the Gaza Strip and then either compelling people to leave or killing them all. Those are the only options. Because right now, there's nowhere on earth that's willing to take 2 million people. The Jordanians won't do it. The Egyptians won't do it. Other countries have said they might take a small number here and there, but it's minuscule compared to it. So even if people want to leave it, I'm certain that there are some that would like to. There's nowhere for them to go. And so if that be the case, and by the way, you can complain about these other countries who are not willing to take them, but in their view, what they're claiming is, at least, and I'm sure that there's partial truth to this, they say we don't want to participate ethnic cleansing with Israel, because if Egypt, and however difficult it would be for them to actually house and where would they put those people, all the logistics issues are quite legitimate. But even on that substance alone, if they said, sure, let them come here, then you are participating with the government of Israel and letting the people go and forcing them out, because you have created the conditions that make it intolerable and impossible to have any kind of life at all. And so they would be participating by allowing you to complete that job. That's what they see. That's how they see it. And there's some validity to that argument. But it's not going to work, because there's no reason for them to feel any compulsion to do that. They would be taking on enormous consequent difficulties. Jordan already has several million, if I'm not mistaken, 2 or 3 million refugees from years gone by from Palestinians in their country already. So they've already done quite a lot, but they're not willing to do any more for the reasons I just specified. We should not be allowing our ammunition, our diplomatic cover, our weapons, anything like that, to continue to facilitate something that is killing large numbers of people and making life impossible for them. That is un-American. It's un-American. And it's time to call that out. And look, so many people are afraid to. I saw on some news this week that there was some more protest at Columbia University and several other places, and a lot of the media is characterizing this as pro-Hamas, and they should all be deported, and all these bad people. I can't believe they're doing that. Never even mentioning that those people were not pro-Hamas per se. Some are, by the way, and they'll just leave that aside for a second. So I don't want to pretend that there are none, because there are some. I've seen them. But the vast majority are pro-Palestinian people. They're saying the same things that I'm saying right here. They're just doing it in different ways that we don't like. And they're disrupting finals, and they were doing some stuff in the library, whatever. It was very disruptive. It was very hard. There's a lot of the Jewish people genuinely feel threatened. They generally feel afraid. And I don't dispute any of that either, nor do I minimize it. I'm sure that they do. I'm sure they feel that way. But these people, many of them, are protesting because of the egregious conditions that Gary just showed you on those videos. That's what they're standing up for. But many of our media aren't even talking about that. All they do is just say it's pro-Hamas, and they don't list a word that any of them said. You didn't see any interviews with them. You didn't see, why are you protesting? What are you against? They don't even give space to it. And so that leaves many Americans only hearing that there are these pro-terrorist people. Holy cow. Right here in America, of course, get them out. Why wouldn't we want to do that? That's what the intent is behind these very selective statements by media, by some of our politicians, and some other influence leaders, because they are still locked into whatever this other government says. We should do what they say, even if it's not in our interest, even if it violates what has always historically been American values. That's the part that really troubles me and puzzles me to a certain extent. A lot of people say, well, it's because of all the money that Israeli sources put into the government, all this kind of stuff. And there's a lot of truth to that. But there's other people that put money into American government too. There's lots of people that want to influence the government. There's millions and millions of dollars, whether you're talking about, even Saudi Arabia, or other kinds of other countries, or obviously the defense industrial base, or pharma, whatever. Lots of people put a lot of money, but it has some effect sometime here and there. This one, though, has just almost captured the entire left and right divide, so there's almost no dispute at all. At least it hadn't been. Now, this thing by Thomas Friedman here could be a crack in the edifice here, and we need to make sure that this gets out there. Folks, listen, I ask you a lot to like and subscribe. I really ask you to do that here too. This message needs to get out. Don't just hit the like and subscribe. I need you to take this and send it to anyone else you know. Go to listservs that you have, go to DM groups that you have. We need to get this out there so people recognize that what's going on is not good in our name. It's not good for Americans. It's, of course, horrific for the Palestinian people. And hear me carefully, it is bad for Israel. The Netanyahu government, and Friedman is right to characterize this. And by the way, let me be clear on one other thing here and kind of push pause on that. I am not in any way, shape, or form against the Israeli people at all, period. I am definitely for them. I want them to live in peace. I want them to not have to worry about Katyusha rockets raining down on them. I want them to not have to worry about getting on a bus and it could blow up someday. I don't want that for any of them. But again, hear carefully. Israel is never going to have that kind of life as long as they try to compel an entire population. And we're talking about the Gaza Strip, but you got to add the West Bank into that too, because there's 3 million Palestinians that live in there that are also under horrific conditions. And if you don't get to a place where all 5 million of those Palestinians have a possibility for peace and a hope, nobody in Israel is either. So when you say things like, yes, whatever Netanyahu says, this is mirroring what the Israeli government says, you are supporting things that are harming Israeli people. Understand that. Let me categorically say that. You are supporting measures by this ridiculous government there that harms the very Israeli people you claim you want to defend. Obviously, it's catastrophic for the Palestinian people, but it's bad for the Israeli people as well. So it is time for a sea change here. And I hope and I pray that those reports that President Trump is ready to say, it's time to end the war in Gaza. It's time to look to reconstruction. It's time to give the Palestinians some reason to hope that if they follow a peaceful path that doesn't include bombing and terrorism on Israel, that they have a shot at having a hope, that they have a reason to not go to military means. Listen, by doing that, you would create the internal pressure on the Palestinian people to push against any of these Hamas types, to push against any of these radical Islamic kind of types that want to just keep fighting. And there are those. This is the way that you can get internally for them to push not to have these kinds of operations against the Israeli people. But listen, also, the last point I want to make here, I know this is not pie in the sky either. You're not going to solve the problem by doing this, but you'll start on the path to have the problem solved. But what Israel has done since, for decades, really, but certainly in its overreaction since the 10/7 terrorist attacks, because of what they've done, they have buried seeds deep in the ground that the family members of all of these tens of thousands of people, especially children and women and elderly who have been killed, you can't undo that. The psyche has been permanently scarred, and that's something that's going to have to be dealt with for generations, and there's just no way around that. But if you can't get to this point generations from now where there's at least a possibility of peaceful coexistence, and let's at least shoot for that low bar. Peaceful coexistence is possible generations from now, as long as we stop this path that we've been on unbroken since 2023 and start going down one that has a chance, and then have courageous leaders willing to push back against the popular narratives that says this is where we're going to go. Because if we don't, then all of this is going to be for naught. And these seeds will one day, my friend, grow into a bitter garden that may not be controlled, that it could be far worse than anything that happened on 10/7. If you want to avoid that, this is the path we need to go down. Thank you very much. I appreciate it. Like I said, please do share this with folks. As you may have known, I was slotted to be the Deputy Director of National Intelligence in the Trump administration, but there was some elements that in the Israeli side that did not like my views and successfully got to the White House to have that sabotage right before I was supposed to have started. This is not a personal issue with me. I'm actually happy to be here. I'm glad to have stayed here. It was debatable whether I wanted to leave here and go there anyway. I wanted to serve the country. But listen, the reason that I bring that up is not because of me personally, because obviously I'm in a really good spot here. The problem is that these kinds of actions, there is real pressure behind the scenes against our government for them to follow the needs of another government. And that is wrong. I don't care what government it is. Don't care any government on the earth. If they're influencing at the highest levels of our government and policies and personnel, that is a problem that should be a red line. And that also needs to get fixed. Thank you very much, folks. Appreciate you listening today. Look forward to seeing you next week on the Daniel Davis Deep Dive.